Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Yavin, the founder and CEO of Cointelligence. And briefly to introduce myself, I have been an entrepreneur for many years. I'm a lawyer. And when I was introduced to blockchain and cryptocurrencies about 4 years ago, I decided to start Cointelligence. And we are focused mainly on research, education. And recently, we launched Cointelligence Fund focused on investments in blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And I have the pleasure of hosting Dr. Jane Thomason today. And I will ask you, Jane, to introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Arnon, and hello, everyone. It's a real privilege to be your very first guest on your podcast. So thank you for that. I guess I'm a pioneer for blockchain for social impact. I was one of the early people who saw its potential to be able to have an impact on the poor and vulnerable and connect people to the economy and connect people to services that hadn't been possible before. So since 2016, I've really pursued a pathway of trying to understand that and trying to tell the stories to other people so that they can understand that blockchain is so much more than speculative cryptocurrencies.
Thank you for that. And let's just head it off, and I'll ask you the first question that I would like to ask you today. How can we build a more inclusive economy with blockchain?
Well, the thing about blockchain that's really special in my view is it's going to allow, and my focus is always on the people at the bottom of the pyramid, people who possibly don't have identity, people who are not connected to the economy, people who are not connected to government services. And the combination of blockchain and mobile technology, because remember, we've got now 70% of the world's population have access to mobile technology, means that we're going to be able to bring in that bottom billion into the economy and into government services and allow them to exchange on a direct peer-to-peer basis, whatever it is they have to exchange, whether it's services or whether it's crops or cultural artifacts or whatever. And so we're already seeing some terrific innovations coming up in blockchain in emerging economies. And interestingly enough, but maybe not surprisingly, the pandemic's actually accelerated some of the developments that we've been seeing all around the world. So, I think it's well beyond a belief now that blockchain is able to help poor communities. What we're seeing all around Asia and Africa and Latin America are people who are innovating using these technologies now. So a couple of stories I want to share because, some of them are unexpected. One is the game Axie Infinity, and you might have heard the story coming out of the Philippines where communities are playing Axie Infinity and buying and selling and competing with NFTs and earning money of an amount of the order of $400 a week, which is putting food on the family's table during lockdown. And another example, again from the Philippines, was that micro entrepreneurs who sell Netflix and Spotify cards as their business couldn't get any foreign exchange because everything was shut down, and so the money exchange venues were shut down as well. So they started using crypto to exchange very small amounts of foreign exchange so they could keep their enterprises going. And we're hearing stories like this from all around the world.
Yes, by the way, you mentioned in your answer government services, and it has nothing to do with what you referred to, but I'm interested to know what is your opinion about government elections based on blockchain? Do you think that it will happen in the future, and governments will actually use blockchain for the process of the election itself?
Look, I'm absolutely certain it will. Obviously, voting is one of the big use cases for blockchain, but I think maybe people's ambition has outshone them initially, you're not going to get an entire country running something as important as an election on a blockchain unless it's been tested. So what I predict is that you're going to start seeing smaller jurisdictions, maybe districts and maybe smaller cities and things like that. Or even there's an experiment going on here in Australia with a guy called Dion McCurdy, who's got something called My Vote, and he's basically doing it with a student population of 20,000 at a university here, allowing them to vote about, you know, what services come onto campus. So we're seeing the smaller experiments as people prove out the technology, but in time, I'm confident that voting is going to be one of the use cases that we will see somewhere governments using.
I have to agree with you. I'd like to ask you something a bit different. How are you personally involved in digital inclusion?
Well, in a lot of different ways. So since I got involved in blockchain, my whole background, by the way, is in international development. So this is working with people in developing countries, strengthening their health services, governance, women's empowerment, you know, agricultural supply chains and so forth. So I continue to be involved through some of the projects that I've been working on, working through these projects with governments in Indonesia, for example, looking at how they can use blockchain at the district level and blockchain for cash transfers into very remote areas. I'm also on the board of a bank that's the first digital bank in a country called Papua New Guinea. And I'm also working with several startups that are, you know, developing blockchain-based solutions in different parts of the world and advising them and giving them my ideas. And then I think the other thing that I do is I speak a lot and I write a lot, because that's how you make knowledge accessible. Because I think with blockchain, it is complicated and people deliberately make it more complicated by making up new words that no one understands and then using them a lot, which just confuses people. So, you know, I think that there's a task there, and maybe with your academy, I hope you can do it, is just make it simple, help people understand how it's going to help them and how they can get access to it.
I completely agree with you. And not only that, I think that one of the biggest problems with blockchain is that it completely changes some of the basics that we were educated and were used to since we were born, and it's so fundamental. And just as an example, yesterday I was visiting a friend with my family, and he wanted me to explain to him about blockchain and about Bitcoin. And I sat down with him and I explained, and I told them before I started explaining to him, and obviously I've been doing it for 4 years almost now, and I told them most chances that after we have a discussion, and it can be a very lengthy discussion, 1 hour, 2 hours, even 3 hours, you will just be more confused than the time that we started the discussion, because it will change so many things that you are used to. And it always happens. That's always the case when I am talking to people that don't know anything about blockchain or cryptocurrencies. Thank you for the answer. And I'd like to also ask you, who is still being excluded, or who do you feel is most underrepresented? And you mentioned before that it's the people that don't have the access to the services, but I would like to ask you to extend on that and give us all the different examples that you can give us about these specific underrepresented people, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you start off, identity is the key to everything. Identity is people's access, whether it's to money, the economy, services, being able to buy and sell things. And so there are 1.5 billion people in the world who don't have any sort of identity. Many of them are in humanitarian settings. And until someone gets access to an identity, then they're going to be denied many of the things that we absolutely take for granted, whether it's health services or education services or government grants, and in some cases even being able to be married, for example. And then once you allow people to have an identity and to be able to exchange a digital value, cryptocurrencies or other forms of value, then that enables them to start to participate with whatever they've got in the economy. And I think that, that's a really huge thing. The big piece which I mentioned to you is this mobile phone coverage, because as it grows, those people who don't have phones are going to be able to be connected to the economy. And the other big development that I think is really important that's taking off now is around voice activation, because a lot of people at the bottom of the pyramid are illiterate. So even if they get a phone, they're not necessarily going to be able to understand how to use that phone. So there's a lot of work going on with very cheap voice activated devices, so they can be instructed in their own local language how to access cryptocurrencies or how to apply for a government grant or whatever it is that they want to do. And so I think the combination of mobile peer-to-peer transfers and voice technology is going to mean that everyone on the planet can be included. But you still have to remember that there's a learning curve for anyone, even if they've got a device and they can, listen to voice activation. People lack confidence and they need others to be able to show them how to do it. Because I was on a conversation with our team in Indonesia recently, and 300,000 small women-owned businesses went digital during the pandemic, but they didn't know how to be digital. And so what happened there was that, kind of like a peer educator, if I could use that term, often a member of the family who understood how to use mobile devices and how to access the digital economy would be like a tutor to them. So I don't think we just presume someone gets a device and they're connected. There has to be a process of helping people understand what this is and how they can use it.
Thank you for explaining that. Interesting, fascinating indeed. I'd like to ask you another question. How do we avoid exploitation of emerging economies by scammers and people who are focused only on their own gains?
Yeah, I wish we could, and I wish I had a good answer to that. And I think that one of the challenges, which is challenges for regulators all around the world, is they're not fast enough to catch what's going on. And, I think on the one hand, there are genuine people all around the world that are trying to help communities get involved and understand how to use blockchain for their own benefit. But there are also people who are running blatant scams. And I know the financial regulators are trying all around the world, and they respond in varying ways, from being totally heavy-handed and banning Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies to trying to regulate it in other ways. Obviously, many turn to community education to try and help people understand, what they can and can't do. But I myself have been the subject of scams, so I expect that it's not just people in emerging economies. The scammers are everywhere, and we can all get caught. And other than, the thing that I think we all have to fight to do in the blockchain and crypto community is for those of us who are in it for the right reasons, who genuinely believe that this is a transformative technology for good, that we're kind of moving the tsunami that way rather than the other way, and calling out the scammers. I don't know if you look at that post that comes out called REKT, R-E-K-T, that exposes people in the DeFi space who are carrying out, bad actions. And we need more people who understand what's going on to be calling out the people who aren't the good players in the industry. And the rest of us need to work to give the industry the credibility that it needs and deserves.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, unfortunately, it's happening too much. I should know. I called out a few scammers before, and hopefully it will change for the better, and and hopefully the regulators will do much more. I completely agree with what you said. Unfortunately, I'm looking at what the regulators have been doing until now, and it's definitely not enough, and definitely needs to happen much more. And what you said about just banning Bitcoin or banning crypto in general, it's horrible in my opinion. And just for the last few days, we've seen a few headlines, specifically from today. The financial minister, I think that's the position that announced the ban by Mexico now for cryptocurrencies, and that's following what we've seen until now. And it's completely wrong. Obviously, in my opinion, it's just not dealing with the problems, just postponing anything, because obviously, I'm sure that you and I think, I mean, that you think as I think, the blockchain and crypto is here to stay, and it's not going to change. I'd like to ask you on a completely different topic. What is your opinion, and how do you see everything around NFTs? You mentioned DeFi, and people are connecting NFTs with DeFi recently a lot, and I'd like to hear, what do you think about NFTs in general? Everything that you have to say about NFTs, please.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing is, we are going through our own experiment at the moment because we decided to do an NFT auction for charity. But even that has been really interesting because, you know, every time you read about it, but when you do it, you learn. So, for example, when we actually minted the NFTs, the cost of gas was really high. So simply to get these things minted and listed was really expensive. And of course, we've been in the pandemic. And so when we wanted to end the auction, because different cities in Australia were being shut down, we need to extend the auction. And so we went back to extend the auction, but of course it's on a blockchain, so it can't be changed. So, you know, I'm making fun of it. So I think the world's learning about NFTs as we go. But I think it's a bit of a fad at the moment, and we're probably going to see some big disasters before it all gets sorted out, because the reality is the token is actually only appointed to some sort of physical asset and says that you should own it. But unless the token and the physical asset come together and there's some sort of, you know, contractual or coded agreement that makes that clear, then, you know, I think we're going to start seeing people running around and selling the NFTs and selling the physical assets separately, and maybe a whole lot of court cases about that. So I don't think we've seen the end of it yet. But I do think that things like, you know, Axie Infinity and this issue where people can trade these NFTs in games and then between games is really going to open up the world of crypto. And I've always said, you know, people have been jumping up and down about mass adoption for a number of years, but you've got to say, what is the pathway? And I actually think gaming and this trading of NFTs within gaming is actually going to be a way that you get vast numbers of people in the world comfortable with and using and trading and making money out of digital assets, which they couldn't do in games before. So I think that's going to be the big thing. I mean, we are seeing lots of football stars and, you know, McLaren, the racing car vehicles, and luxury good people doing NFTs. And I think this will be an experimental learning phase while we watch what happens. And again, there'll be scammers in there, and there's going to be some mighty great rorts that take place, and we're going to hear about it maybe on your program.
Absolutely. And specifically with regards to NFTs and everything around the inclusive digital landscape, and specifically with regards to digital inclusion, do you think there is any connection between that, or it's not relevant at all?
Well, I mean, I'll just go back to Axie Infinity, because that's absolutely, this is keeping Filipino families out of poverty, because they can play and they can earn money using NFTs within games. how people are able to use them in other ways, I think we haven't started to see that in a serious way yet, because most of the things, at least I'm seeing, is more like celebrities selling things, or the guy who, wrote the code for the internet selling the code, or the first tweet, those sorts of things. So I think we haven't started to see NFTs being used for, say, preservation of rainforests and different things like that, which at some point, you probably could see, but I'm, at least to my knowledge, we're not seeing it yet. Obviously, I'm keen on the whole idea of using it as a new venue for raising money for charity or for disaster relief and things like that. So I think that it will. I think it will give people access to be able to be included. And I just want to, kind of throw in DeFi there, because that's the thing about DeFi as well, is people have been cut out of the kind of investment aspect of the economic system because they only had very small amounts of money to play with. But what DeFi is doing is kind of taking down the walls of the traditional finance system and all of those middlemen who used to make money out of, being in between you and lending your money and someone else using your money. And so it just makes it much more accessible to people. But it is still highly risky, because you're putting yourself, at the risk of the code doing what it says it's going to do, that the people who are running the organization are actually running a decentralized organization, because that's one of the things that, we've been seeing lately, is a lot of these DeFi projects start very centralized. And so people can and do manipulate what's going on. And again, we've seen some big scandals coming out of DeFi. But that's not to say that this isn't transformative. This is just that experimental, innovative phase as people work out what they need to do to be able to run this in a safe and secure way. And obviously, the big challenge for regulators is, who do you turn to when something goes wrong, because it's all about automated code. There is no one to go back to. And again, that's like what you were saying in the beginning. It turns all of the traditional concepts, how we were brought up, how we believe about governance, on its head. And everyone hasn't quite figured out, how to deal with that yet.
Yes, absolutely. It completely changes everything. And specifically DeFi, I think that we will see so much going on with regulation, or regulators trying to regulate it, and I'm not sure that they will succeed so quickly, and it might take them years over years to figure this out. And meanwhile, it's going to be the wild, wild west, as we've seen in blockchain and crypto until now, unfortunately. But to finish off on a positive note, I would like to remind everyone, and I always say that when I'm doing any kind of public speaking or any kind of recording, blockchain and crypto is not just for developers. It's for everyone. Everyone can participate. You don't need to be a coder. You don't need to understand code to get involved. There's so many ways to get involved in these industries. And I am inviting everyone to learn the basics, because it's important for everyone's future, even if they decide not to get involved in it. And I think that everybody should get educated about it in some basic level. And I would like to thank you again for being my first podcast guest. Thank you very much for joining me and agreeing for this interview. And I'm sure that I will be seeing you in the near future again.
Thanks, Ong. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to speaking to you again, and good luck with this new venture.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.